Let's be honest, this is not the worst thing you've caught me doing. Welcome in to the Bro 4 Squad podcast, where we are just a bunch of bros drinking beer and talking movies. I am your host, the Mayor Jeff Hornacek. Thank you so much for joining us for the movie discussion tonight for episode 205. Before we get into it, let's go around and meet my co-host tonight, our legal counsel, Ronnie Cycli. Cycli, I think I've asked you this several times before, but I'm starting to get my affairs in order in this matter, and so I want to get your opinion once again. Can I sue my neighbor for mowing his lawn before 10 a.m. on a Saturday? We have this is a recurring offense that has taken place.
No, you the only thing you can really do is retaliate by mowing your lawn at midnight. Drunkenly,
Okay.
of course. Yeah.
In the dark.
It's Wild West laws here, guys. Like, if your neighbor's gonna pull that shit, then you
Tit for
pull
tat.
it back.
You know, I've never mowed in the dark, and I'm trying to think how difficult that would be off the top of my head.
Get some like glow in the dark like barriers.
How well do I know my yard? It's like a Jedi training
Ooh.
exercise. Like, do you know the property line as well as you think
That's
you
like
do?
the ultimate suburban father, dad, husband move. Like, I know my lawn so well that I can do it in the dark.
Now, my neighbor, nice guy, and I'll give him credit. I live in the South where, like, yeah, I get you don't want to mow your yard at like noon because it's fucking unbearably hot, but like 9:15, that's a little too much, right?
Yeah, 100%. Dude, I'm just like getting up and going around at 9:15.
Yeah.
That's breakfast time. That's like just getting yourself together time.
10 a.m. I think is the reasonable cutoff. So all I have to do is just burn his house to the ground. Is what we.
Yeah, no, that's
That's
reasonable.
Perfect. I don't want to overreact. So
Yeah, no.
it's-
I saw a burn online that was so funny. That was like, what is one of the best insults you've ever overheard in person? And it was like two guys at the Home Depot or Lowe's, and they were getting in a fight because who knows why. And one guy was like, dude, don't talk to me like that. I'm an everyday Lowe's guy. You're a Saturday Lowe's guy.
Oh,
And I was like, fuck.
holy shit!
That's when you're in your 30s or 40s. That's a burn. Like, fuck, dude. All right.
I don't know if it's also kind of pathetic. Like, why are you here every day? Can't you just get what you need in like
Yeah,
one
probably.
trip? Doesn't seem like.
Why
Imagine
not
grocery shopping like that. Like, I got 1/8 of the things we need. I'll be back the next 4 days.
This is the guy needing to get away from his wife.
Yeah, he just comes there for like retail therapy. Just walks the aisles. All right, well, here on the Bro 4 Squad podcast, we are everyday those guys, sadly. And typically we start every episode off with the most important thing in any bro's life, and that is chest day. But we're actually going to skip that and go straight into our protein shake, which is what have we watched lately? Because Cycli and I have quite a few things that either cross over or just it's been too long since we've really started to empty out our cups here and gone over some things we've watched lately. So the title of this episode, Cycli, I don't know if you saw it, but I called it, Did We Watch the Worst Movie Ever?
Mm-hmm.
So do you want to lead with what is possibly the worst
Wow.
movie or end with it?
Either, I mean, how about both? We just keep going on the Bikini Hackers.
So yeah, I guess that's
We
it.
give the people what they want to hear.
All right, so the title of the movie is Bikini Hackers. And before we get into it, was it Tubi that we watched it
Yes,
on?
it's free on Tubi.
And
honestly,
you found
like-
this through Reddit, correct?
Yeah, there's a subreddit called r/bad movies. So r/bad movies. And you and I have always been unabashed on the pod about like enjoying bad movies because they can be really entertaining in a hilarious way, right? Like, it's not that we're watching something that's just like,
Thanks Killing
okay,
is a good
yeah,
example.
it's killing us and this is a bad movie. Dude, like, give me a bad movie that like doesn't take itself seriously and you can turn on for an hour and a half. And so yeah, I follow the subreddit and there was this movie and I texted you immediately. Everyone was like, the post was, all right, guys, I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna sit myself down and watch this Bikini Hackers movie. And every comment was like, Jesus Christ.
So it has a 1.7 out of 10 on IMDb.
God, that's almost too high.
And before we dive into the discussion here, I think when you and I say that we like bad movies, so this movie is labeled as a comedy, but
Is
I
it
think
really?
that's the only, and again, this is just IMDb, so don't take it as gospel, but that's the only genre listed for the film. And I have to say, I think that the spirit of the bad movies subreddit that you found is to find films that have a redeeming quality in the sense that like it's entertaining how bad it is. But I'll let you lead the conversation here slightly. But not only did I not find that the case here, I don't think I'm being hyperbolic when I say this movie is so difficult to watch and get through for a multitude of reasons that it was eliciting like a physical pain in me.
Yeah.
Like I was feeling chemically imbalanced. It took me 3 attempts to watch it, 3 sittings, and it's an hour 6 minutes long.
It's the longest hour 6 minutes of your life. I did the same thing. You and I did not watch it together.
And we would have to like
ill.
hype each other up before we'd watch it. Like, all right, dude, I'm gonna try and watch like 20 more minutes of it.
And you would think, oh, like I can sit for anything for 20 minutes. Like it literally, I felt the same way. Pit in your stomach, like bad. Like there's a lot of movies. You and I have watched and done a commentary interview the director of Velocipaster on Amazon. Like we don't mind bad.
That movie is legitimately funny.
Yeah, like it's like I even love bad disaster movies like 2012. They're absolutely ridiculous and horrible, but they're entertaining. I can honestly say I've seen some college film major movies, like I've seen like Thanksgiving, just like ridiculous films. I have never seen a movie like Bikini Hackers, and not in a good way.
So
it hurt.
People at home who haven't seen it, let me just say this. We'll break it down a few ways. First off, like I understand budget, obviously with these things, it's shoestring, right? Like we're limited locations. A lot of the people are probably not like actual professional actors or people doing it as favors, and the turnaround schedule is probably, like a couple weeks maybe before it goes into post. But the first thing I'll say is visually, this thing looked horrendous. Like even if you shot it on an iPhone, what was was it a Steven Soderbergh movie that he shot?
Yeah.
Unsane.
My gosh. Unsane, yeah.
That looked literally 2 or 3 times better than this. Like it visually is gross, and the color changes like within the same scene. So it's like, who edited this thing? So first off, before you even get into how bad the script and acting is, and just the general nonsensical plot or lack thereof, like this thing looks disgusting. It's like hard to sit through because of how bad it looks.
It literally, I didn't mean it like things are hyperbolic. Like it's not at all compared to like watching a college film major's final project, right? Yeah. This is worse than that. It is worse. Like I mean, it was like me and you grabbing a camera, and then filming our friends do this, and not giving them any direction, but just saying, "Hey, read the script." That's what this movie is, and it's impressively bad and not in a good way. Like. Yeah, you said it's an hour 6 minutes. The plot is exactly what the movie says. It's this group of girls who hang out in their bikinis, and again, there's nothing even put into the script that like allows you to believe that they're actually good at hacking. They just swim all day. Worst acting you've ever seen, in my opinion. There's one funny guy, in my opinion, that was the boss, who just repeated himself every single time about like. Getting explained something, and he's like, "Give it to me in English," and they're like, "I can't give it to you more simply anymore."
Yeah.
That was the only generically like moment I laughed in an hour and 6 minutes.
One of the main Bikini Hackers is I'm just guessing here because she doesn't have a photo on her IMDb page, but Zoe Meehan, and she's the one. And I'm not trying to be rude, but I don't know if she had like a strong accent combined with maybe some sort of a speech impediment, but I could not understand a word that she was saying the entire movie. And
had to put on subtitles.
And she probably has like 40% of the dialogue in this thing. Like she speaks a lot.
Yeah. I like to think this should be a segment we call like movies we watch so you don't have to.
Basically,
like if for some reason you out there are wanting to watch this Bikini Hackers
movie. And it's not right. It's not. We only bring this up. It's not that anyone out there would be like, "Oh man, I saw that pop up on Tubi and I was about to click on it." Like no one here is tempted by this film. But in all good conscience, I'm just saying, on my list of movies that I've watched, I think I'm at 1,248 films, and this is now the bottom film on my list.
That's impressive. I have a couple that you're right. This is definitely down there.
I could not. I was looking at my list and I was like, I can find at least one thing about these other 3 that I was between that makes it, in my mind, not as bad a movie as this, because I cannot imagine. And even if we like, there's no entertainment here. That's the main issue. Like, there are some bad movies, like we said, that are actually like kind of, you can sort of laugh at the process of them getting made. This is, it literally hurt me to watch.
And I don't know who it's for. You know what I'm saying? Like, who funded this? What is the purpose of it? because again, it doesn't have a redeeming quality. You know, every actor in this movie knows how absurd it is.
I hope that none of them have the main or the I think Chris Finelli, who plays Danielson, he's got a little bit of acting talent, but I hope no one else legitimately thinks that this is going to be a career for them.
Yeah, the main actresses in the movie were terrible, and I go back to like it's an hour 6 minutes, and there were random cutscenes, and you and I talked about this, where it would divert completely from the plot of the movie, and it would cut to a scene of just two hackers typing to each other, and there's no explanation of what is happening. You're just seeing keywords like typed on screen, and you realize throughout the movie that like they're just doing this to fill time. And you're wondering, like, to be actually labeled a movie, you have to be a certain.
Yeah, I don't know what the.
Yeah. And it's like they didn't even have of the hour 6 minutes. Like 10 of those are just these nonsensical messages between two hackers that their spelling is wrong. Like it doesn't lead to anything. It doesn't explain anything.
I don't know who it's between, and I don't know timeline wise when it happens. But
yeah,
it
has nothing to do with the plot. And I'm like,
sometimes they're not even talking about the plot. It's like they're talking about a separate story.
Yeah. If you want to if you're like us and like you don't find yourselves like minding bad movies and don't wanting to be entertained, I challenge you to watch this and not feel the same way we did. I just don't think there's another movie that I've ever seen that can rival this absurdity. I still couldn't find the budget online.
It physically hurt me to watch it. So if you're out there and you have Tubi and you want to see, I guess the fun game would be how far into Bikini Hackers can you get until you turn
without stopping.
Yeah, even knowing what you're.
I am surprised. You're the more Letterboxd guy. It's at 2.1. How much of that is ironic?
How does it have a higher score on Letterboxd, which is at a 5, than on IMDb, which is at a 10?
Can you tell? Is there a way on Letterboxd to like be like how many people reviewed it? I mean, like, because it has to be a joke, right? Like,
yeah, on IMDb it only has 136 reviews, so that 1.7. I don't think you can give anything a 0.
You and I can go up there and give him 10s and like notch that up. Because people, and you're people listening, you might be like us. You just do it to be a dick, right? Like I'm gonna go give this a 10 because it's funny. So, or give one to like The Godfather or Shawshank, you know.
I gave it. It has 69 reviews. Giggity. I gave it a half star.
Is that the lowest?
Yeah, you can't give it a 0.
69 reviews is a decent amount. That's a lot. That's if you listen to this and you choose to watch Bikini Hackers, guys, it's filmed. Actually, you and I talked about this. It's like a 6th grader made a movie. He clearly can't do porn because he's in 6th grade, but he just films what he thinks is hot, like girls in bikinis, and that's the whole plot.
It's true.
Like it's literally like it's not softcore porn. It's not porn at all. It's just girls walking around bikinis.
Oh. Briefly, because it's only like 3 sentences, let me read you my Letterboxd review, and then I have nothing else to say about this movie. I wrote, I'm not being hyperbolic. This is the worst movie I've ever seen in my life. If you were to play this for a prisoner of war, it would violate the Geneva Convention. I am physically ill after having seen it. No redeeming qualities. Nonsensical. Offensively bad.
That's the one challenge I'll give to anyone listening. This might be the worst movie of all time, and I think that's why it was on bad movie, like why people were laughing about it on movies, on bad movies. So watch it, and let us know if you agree with us. This is the worst movie of all time.
But it did. Like we said, it did cause. I was getting like a stomach ulcer as I was trying to.
Yeah, you're not going to enjoy it. Like, but it's like seeing The Godfather or Shawshank or something like the greatest films ever. It's almost as impressive to make a movie this bad. Like literally.
That's true. It is sort of a masterclass in incompetence.
Yeah, because you could argue thinks killing is stupid, funny, and entertaining.
You could argue it's hard to make a movie this bad.
Yeah, and so they accomplished that. So give it a chance, guys.
Yeah. All right. What else you got?
Well, I'm going to switch it on to a funny way because we know Bikini Hackers was probably extremely low budget. I watched a movie and I know I made you watch it too. It was called Coherence.
Yeah.
And this was a movie, $50,000 budget, filmed, I believe, in about 5 days, which is crazy.
Yeah, this is a great segue from Bikini Hackers.
Yeah, because this proves like how much difference even that you can have, they might have spent the same amount of money, which is crazy, and bikini actors might have had more time together. But Coherence is a film that I had seen on Instagram or Reddit about movies that had just like really good twists or just like mind bendy, and it was very highly rated. And I was like, and everything I've looked up online, people loved it. And it was really cool once you knew that, like, again, it was only filmed in 5 days. There was no full script. The idea of the script is they would tell the kind of like Curb Your Enthusiasm. They would let the actors, hey, you need to lead to this throughout this scene. Or one actor would know that they had to be specifically saying something or leading somewhere, and the other actors didn't. So once you learn that, I think it's clearly low budget. It's kind of filmed on a shaky hand camera. But the concept of the film is a group of friends having dinner. Um, and there's a comet that night going over Earth, that area of Earth, and it's just all of a sudden some abnormalities happen, scientific, or it's labeled a sci-fi. Like odd things start happening. It gets kind of time travel bendy, kind of strange. You don't really know who is who, even though everyone is the same. It really examines like alternate dimensions, alternate universes, like very heavy in that sci-fi side of things. Not a sci-fi like a Star Wars, but really heavily in the idea of like wormholes and that kind of stuff. That like there's an infinite amount of Ronnie Cycles in this universe, right? Like there's an infinite amount of Jeff Hornaceks, and we all could be very similar, but also slightly different from each other. And like a butterfly flaps its wings, and all of a sudden you make a different decision. All those variables of who we could be. And the movie just it's a very short watch, I believe. I think it was like an hour and a half. I loved it. I personally really enjoyed it. It made me really, it was one of those films. I like was on YouTube and listening to, reading about it, listening to pods on Coherence to see what people were saying. And like as I was reading more, as I understood more after watching it, I even had more respect for the movie. Again, considering the budget and the way it was filmed. So I know you watched it relatively after I did. So what were your thoughts?
Yeah, so it's very high concept. And even after, so it went a little bit over my head. I did enjoy it. I don't think quite as much as you did, but I was blown away by the performances in this. I mean, like the acting is, especially for not having a script, like it is incredible, man. Like there's not a single performer in this that I'm like, oh wow, you were kind of holding this this thing back. And there's a lot of weight on the actors too, because like you said, they're essentially playing. I don't think this is really a spoiler because you figured out pretty early on. But they're essentially playing like slightly altered versions of themselves periodically. This to me seems like it would be a bitch to try and direct, because at each give and take, like you have to let the actors know like what little nuance is different about their character in the scene versus the previous scene.
And one of the go ahead, sorry.
I was just gonna say that the YouTube breakdown that I watched, it's unlike Tenet. This doesn't necessarily collapse in on the high concept. Like I still got a lot out of it, but I think I was actually more confused as I saw like all the different layers broken down for me than I was in an initial viewing of it.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think there was like one of those like realities that set in when I was watching is so very early in the scene, early in the movie, where one of the friends at the dinner is talking about how he was an actor on a show.
Yes.
And the girl is like, I don't recognize you. And they're like, oh yeah, he was that
like
guy.
Who
She's
were
like,
you in the show?
Who you were? She's like, you look so different. And then after you realize that that girl and that guy are not of the same universe.
Correct. Yeah. So
like it's just like it's insane. Like this whole like.
So like in her universe, he wasn't on the show.
Yeah, and it breaks down because again, like the whole film. It's not spoiler. This happens really early on. It's just the anomaly of the comet. Is just these people trying to figure out where they actually belong. But when you realize that you're in an infinite, there's infinite universes, you're not going to make it back, guys. Like you don't even know. It's pretty fucking crazy. Again, $50,000 budget. It even if you don't like it, it's impressive.
Yeah,
for what it is.
This is a great example of like how to properly utilize a low budget.
Yeah.
Like basically a single location setting.
Yeah.
And they're pretty much in the house the entire time, or some variation of the house. But again, I was just blown away by how good the performances were in this.
Yeah. Again, probably maybe even a smaller budget and less time together than Bikini Hackers. Would not be surprised.
I just can't believe that both of these films were probably made, yes, with like equitable money behind them.
All right, what you got?
All right, so I'll talk about this just briefly, but I know you're in the midst of watching it, so I'm kind of curious to get your take on where you're currently at. But the wife and I recently finished. It probably took us like 4 or 5 months because we would just watch it like while we were eating. But we finished Boy Meets World, the whole series on Disney Plus, and I hold this show in very high regard. It was a big like nostalgia play for me. Like growing up, it was like one of our main sitcoms that we would watch, and it was the kids on the show were sort of our same age. I think maybe a little. We were maybe a little bit older than them, right? Like when we were in high school, the show already ended. I think hadn't it?
Yeah, I thought they were older than us.
Oh, really?
Or am I crazy? Yeah, I mean, I could be wrong. Yeah.
I don't know exactly when it ended, but I feel like when we were like graduating high school, the show had been off the air for a few years. I could be wrong.
But they were in college by the time they were done, right?
Yeah, I just meant like when we were in high school, this was.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah.
Yeah, it's because it started in '93, ended in 2000. Yeah, so.
Oh, wow, yeah.
It was done by the time we were like in middle school. But
yes.
This show is really good to me, and it's actually not that dated. Like there's not a lot of like jokes or things in it that like would not don't hold up that well today. I do think though one thing that is sort of a failure of this show and a weakness, and I think Michael Jacobs, the creator, is kind of been exposed for this recently, is how basically as the show went on, they got lazier and lazier with character development, and it really only ended up being like Corey, Topanga, and Sean that had anything of note happening to them in the story. Characters like Eric and even like the parents and Jack and Angela, like they're basically become like just like caricatures of actual people. And Corey, you're not there yet, but towards the end of the show is pretty much fucking unbearable. Like he's just like a nagging shrew to every single other character in the show. And it's kind of tough to watch in the end, but still there's enough like quality moments and heartfelt moments in the show to where it's kind of like what you and I like, I think, in sitcoms, where it's like 70% humor, 30% heart. And so it held up pretty well for me. The latter 2 seasons, though, were not as good as I remembered. Where are you at currently?
I am almost done with season 3. I think I have like 2 episodes left.
So is that freshman year of high school?
Yeah, but they kind of blur. It's like freshman and sophomore year because like the show is over 6 years, right? But like it also takes place from 6th grade to like college. So like I think there's some times where they don't really give you a good like sense of what grade they're actually in.
Yeah.
Because they make references to other things. But there's a couple things I will say really quickly. The show is very 90s. It's very corny. It's very PSA-y, where it's like, like do the right things, don't do drugs, take care of like Sean lives in a trailer park and it's hard for him and all, that kind of stuff. It's very 90s. So I don't mind the corniness. Like that's what you expect. What I'm most surprised at, and I talked to you a little bit off pod about this, is the show is not exactly what I remember as a kid, though. Topanga is barely in season 1 and season 2. Even in season 3, she's not in it consistently. And Corey isn't the main character all the time. Like there are some episodes where Corey is almost maybe has 1 or 2 lines.
Right.
And I don't remember that at all. I remember it being Sean, Topanga, and Corey, and of course, the gang, everyone else, Eric, Feeney, whatever. But like, I am surprised how much of the show, at least at the moment, does rely on a little bit of other characters. It might change a little later on, I think. Maybe that's what I remember. But there's a couple episodes in season 3 where I'm like, dude, yeah, Corey is just, I don't know if he's off doing other things in real life. Like he's barely in the episode. So
it is weird because he's like technically the main character, and I guess sort of the titular character, really. Yeah. But he's, to me, like, and I guess this could be the case with a lot of other sitcoms, you just don't really realize it. To me, he's by far the least interesting of all the characters.
Yeah, 100%.
Like he never really has a story. Like, what's his, what's the tension with his character? Like, when will he propose to Topanga? And him and Eric are in an argument. Like, he really has, like, as far as a character arc goes, like, probably the least like interesting from like a narrative perspective. So
and I think it's been hit on way too often, but Eric gets done dirty. Especially by starting in season 3. Like They just make him an idiot.
It's almost like he has like some sort of traumatic brain injury the way he starts acting. He's like a completely different person.
Yep.
Which it's odd, and like you could still have used him, I think, comedically in lots of creative ways without completely changing who he was as a. You notice it a lot more when you just like binge through the show. I'm sure like at the time it was like, oh, it's been 2 years since he was like that. We didn't really pick up on it as much.
I will say really quick, I know I've been enjoying it, but like, man, I do feel like it is a chore to rewatch. Like I rewatch a lot of shows I've seen 1,000 times. I do feel like I am struggling. Like I watch 1 or 2 a day. Like I'm just like,
No, I agree. As far as we've gone back through like How I Met Your Mother and obviously we went back through Modern Family. This is not like, it's not one where like after you watch it, like let's fire up another one. It's just like, I don't know, man. It's a good show, but it's not as digestible, I guess. I can't really justify it much more than that.
Yeah, 100%.
It doesn't go down as easy. All right, what else you got?
Let's see. I mean, we did talk about. Well, you talked about Power Rangers, so we don't need to talk about that. I will talk really quickly about. I know you haven't seen it, but Banner has. I went and saw the Super Mario.
I am really excited to see this, probably more so than I should be. It's the second I'm out for the summer. I'm gonna see it like that next Monday.
And I'll be quick. I don't want to go into it more than, especially with you watching it. I did a double feature weekend. I did John Wick 4 and Mario, so I'll be quick on those. Like Mario, there was a lot of fear going into Mario. I think we talked about on pod. I think those listening felt the same way. The Chris Pratt voice, like all of it.
Can I start to interrupt you? But can I say what's weird? Please. I think you and I, like initially, at least me personally, but I feel like you've sort of echoed this with me. My expectations have been all over the place for this. They were very low. Then for some reason they got really, really high. I think the trailer with Jack Black as Bowser had me really fucking excited.
Yeah.
And then after you had started telling me what some of the like consensus was online, they sort of like leveled off a bit. So I've kind of been all over.
Probably a good place to be. And Banner saw it and he felt, I said the same thing to you that I said to him. And I think he had an enjoyable experience. I mean, he took his daughter. I do think that's the optimal way, like, getting to see, a young child enjoy it. My biggest complaint is, and not in an insulting way, this is very much a kid's movie. It is like, I mean, it is a child's movie. Like, this is not like, oh, hey, like, let's see Toy Story with our kid and it's fun. But there's adult themes, there's, an adult can enjoy it. There's depth to it. There is emotion. Like watch the first 10 minutes of Up, right? Like,
or like Shrek, which is like sort of the
Shrek.
template
like,
for.
You do not need to have an animated movie. Like, doesn't mean it can't have emotion or heart. And I expected it to be like some sort of Pixar or Shrek, because Mario is a staple for the last 45 years. Right, like people in the 80s grew up with Mario and Donkey Kong, right? Like you and I are a little younger than them, but in our 90s we played the Mario games. It's been cross generation, 3 or 4 generations that Mario's been a part of. So the fact that they went full children's movie with very little amount of depth surprised me. I'm not saying it's a bad thing. The movie is what it is. It's fun. It's fine. I laughed plenty of times. There's just not depth to it. And you know what? Maybe this was a test run. It made over $1 billion. So we're about to get a Nintendo universe. I really do believe that.
That has me pretty excited.
Yeah, I think we are going to get a Nintendo universe like a la Marvel, where we're going to get Yoshi movies, which they allude to. We're going to get more Donkey Kong. We're going to eventually lead into a Super Smash Bros. Movie. Like, they're going to go all in.
I would love like a Kirby has a pretty cool like world we could go in. Obviously, a Zelda movie would fucking destroy.
I think a Zelda. They hinted there's a Zelda Easter eggs, there's Yoshi Easter eggs, there's all that kind of stuff. So, maybe this was the plan, is like, let's go soft and easy and appease everyone, and let's make a lot of money and intro the world. I just think Mario is such a cross-generational market that that was my one thing. I was like, why didn't it have more depth? And unless you hate Jack Black, if you're one of those for fun, just want to hate Jack Black, he is the best part of the movie as Bowser. He is.
He had to just be having the time of his life.
Yes. And he writes a song, of course, as Jack Black. And the song actually makes it into the top 100 and the Billboard Top 100.
Really?
Yeah. I love his relation. He's obsessed with Peach, and like obviously in the games Bowser loves Peach, but like kidnapping Peach. But he's genuinely in love with Peach, and so it's really funny the way they go about it. Yeah.
All right, I'm excited to see it and form my own opinion, but I think it's, I mean, financially a huge success. Critically, I think it did fine.
It's fine, and again, you're not going to come out of it like upset. Or like that movie sucks. It's just you're gonna walk out and be like, yeah, it was fun for an hour and a half. Like it's what it is. What it is.
Good. All right, a movie that I watched that I had actually recommended to me by Nate Thurmond, and I don't know if I was in the right frame of mind, but this thing was a fucking blast, and I missed it a few years ago when it came out, but the concept was really, really cool, very meta, which you know I love, and that was The Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent, which is the Nicolas Cage, Pedro Pascal movie where Nicolas Cage plays a version of himself, the actor Nicolas Cage, who was invited out to this private island by Pedro Pascal's character, who is essentially like this rich drug lord in I think it's Mexico, but it might be Puerto Rico or somewhere else. And Nicolas Cage is struggling to get roles at the time, and he gets offered a hefty sum to go basically attend Pedro Pascal's birthday party. While there, he gets approached by the CIA to investigate his Pedro Pascal's compound and try and figure out if he has in fact kidnapped some politician's daughter. But he starts befriending Pedro Pascal, as you would imagine. Hilarity ensues. Basically, I was just like in the right frame of mind for this, and having seen Pedro Pascal in so many serious roles lately, him taking a turn at comedy.
Is this the gif of him like crying, laughing, or whatever that is all over the internet?
It is. That's a really funny scene where, this isn't a spoiler because you have no context for it, but him and Nicolas Cage take shrooms together, and they're kind of going on like this gamut of emotions. I don't know. It's just really.
I cannot believe this sounds amazing. Like, how did this movie even get made? It's hilarious.
Yeah, it's a stupid idea, but it works really well. And I'm on like a Nicolas Cage kick right now. I just think the guy, I just love how he always goes for it with varied results. But like, say what you want, he is not going to mail it in. And yes, he's taken some paycheck roles and he's been in some bad movies and he's done some bad accents, but I respect him for that. He's just the guy that like doesn't give a fuck. He's like, dude,
but he gives you great guilty pleasure movies.
I know.
Con Air, National Treasure, like
The Rock, Face Off, like this dude's all over. Even the Ghost Rider is like horribly bad.
You and I haven't seen it yet, but I think we are really looking forward to seeing Renfield. Like,
absolutely.
It's just like I think maybe a few years ago I'd be like, no, what the fuck? And now I'm like, you know what? Fuck it. It's who cares? It's Nick Cage gonna be just Dracula. Like, let's have fun. I want to see this. You told me how much you loved it.
Yeah, I think you would really like it. It was a blast. It was hilarious. Pedro Pascal. This was like the beginning of the Pascal-assance, I think. Like, right. This came out as like season 1 of Mando was coming out.
Yeah.
So I've seen 2 comedy movies with Pedro Pascal. This and The Bubble on Netflix, that Judd Apatow movie about making a blockbuster movie inside of basically like a COVID bubble.
Oh yeah.
And that one was pretty bad, but this one he was pretty good in, comedically.
Yeah, I need to check that out. I had not even heard of it until you told me about it.
And like it was on my radar, but nothing. Like Nate Thurmond watched it and said it was hilarious, and that just kind of gave me the nudge to give it a poke. So check it out. All right, what else you got?
So I mentioned earlier, same weekend I saw Mario, saw John Wick 4, and you haven't seen it, right?
I have not. I'm a big Wick head.
It is a daunting.
Yeah, I saw the runtime. That's what kept me away from it, was the runtime.
Yeah, it's so I mean, I remember the first time I saw the John Wick films was only a few years ago. I didn't see any of them. It was when John Wick 3 was coming out, and everyone was like, "Dude, these movies are actually really good." I'm like, "Okay, it's just Keanu Reeves killing people. Like, nothing wrong with that." I'm just like, don't tell me it's like this game changer. So eventually, after like the 100th person was like, "No, the fucking John Wick movies are amazing." My wife and I watched the first one, and then of course you're like, "Fuck, okay, it's amazing," especially as a dog lover, right? Like you're like, you know what? I would kill 1,000 people for my dog, actually. And so I'm sure those listening, like, yeah, like who knew when they filmed John Wick that it would become what it did today? And obviously, what's insane about the films is there's hardly any dialogue, right? Like there's not much going on other than just the most amazing, unique, creative kills you've ever seen. Because the choreography on these things, like I don't know how these like they deserve Oscars. Like there needs to be.
They really do. Yes.
They really do. And this is brought up a debate that I think is valid. There needs to be a stunt category at the Oscars. It really, like the amount of work these people are putting in and what they're putting their bodies through is absolutely insane and nothing short of just like pure dedication. There needs to be some sort of recognition for what they do. So John Wick 4 was the first one I got to see in theaters. And I'll just say this, like guys, it's another John Wick movie. It's great. Like it is the biggest flaws on this one, and there's two. One, the runtime. It is definitely at least 30 minutes too long.
I don't know how they get away with that, really.
And the thing is, it's not like, and you and I think you and I come sometimes not disagree, but we feel a little differently. Like, I don't mind 3-hour plus movies. I really don't, if it's necessary, right? Like I you know, like whatever, like Titanic, Lord of the Rings, like all this kind of stuff. I'm like, dude, if you're gonna give me 3.5 hours, then prove to me that like you needed every ounce of that. This one, you can tell by watching. You're like, dude, they could easily have cut 5 minutes from this.
I was going to say, is
easily?
What is it? Super plot heavy? Is that why?
No.
Because this world, as it's built and built and built, I'm like, is this thing at some point going to collapse in on itself? There's too much lore.
It doesn't go into what the lore. I thought the way the third one ends, right? Like I thought it was going to be a whole war on the high table. Like the movie, I mean, it kind of is, but kind of isn't. It goes in a different direction, which I was a little surprised with. But like you can just definitely tell, not that it's a bad thing, you're still being entertained. It just didn't need to be that long.
Right.
And then the other thing they did is there's odd moments of humor, slapsticky humor, that is fine. Like, you know, like you can have moments of, you know, comedic relief in these kind of films, but it doesn't necessarily fit in the moments they added it. It's some of them are near the climax of the film. At one point, my wife, in literally the peak climax of the film, starts cackling because of how absurd a specific scene is. Not to say we didn't love the movie. She enjoyed it, but like they really did some weird stuff with it. Like it's not the best John Wick. I would maybe put it my third favorite, but it's still great. Still recommend it if you love John Wick. Those were my only two flaws. Everything else, unbelievable kills, unbelievable choreography. There's a blind man who's an assassin, absolutely incredible how he performs.
Johnny Yen, right?
Yeah,
he's awesome.
Keanu Reeves has 400 words. It says 400 words in the movie. I'm pretty sure it's only that. So every word he delivers is very slow and methodical, to the point where I almost felt like Keanu Reeves forgot how to talk. Like literally, we both walked out of the film.
Yeah,
like,
his cadence in this, it's kind of like he gives each syllable a full second and a half.
It gets worse. By the end of the movie, you're like, dude, I think the guy forgot how to talk, and no one helped him. But anyway, that's John Wick 4. Still fun. As much as I'm acting like I'm complaining about it, it's still a great time. It just, I wouldn't blame you for waiting till it comes out and streaming it in pause and get up every so often.
I might go see this in theaters just because I feel like the set pieces would be really cool to watch on a big screen, but also being able to pause it and go take a piss and get, you know, another beer and stuff like that would be a pretty big advantage.
Yeah.
And these are all, are these HBO, is this a Warner Brothers release? Like, is this HBO Max?
I think they were, at least the three of them we watched recently were on Peacock.
Oh, really? Okay. The streaming licensing situation is
who knows? It changes.
Because they could be Warner, but also like they could have licensed their shit out.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure they have been on HBO too. So yeah.
All right. Two things I'll just really briefly talk about. This one because we did a movie commentary on it that's going to be dropping in a few weeks-ish when The Flash comes out. And that was Banner, Geiger, and I did a commentary on the DC animated movie that the Flash movie is based on the comic art from, which is Justice League, The Flashpoint Paradox. And Cycle, you actually jumped in briefly, probably like
a little cameo there.
2/3 through it. Yeah, a little tease right there as part of the multiverse. And I thoroughly love this DC animated movie. One of the coolest things we ever saw in the animated films was the Thomas Wayne arc in this. I am so excited for The Flash in theaters. However, I do have to say, embarrassingly, for like the first 25 minutes of this movie, I was getting a lot of plot points confused with the other DC animated movie, Justice League Apocalypse War. So, not my proudest moment.
What, all DC comic book animated films look the same to you?
I'm ashamed.
God, so fucked up.
So unprogressive of me. But definitely worth a watch. This one's on HBO Max. So whenever this drops, just check it out with us. And just before we move on slightly, what are your thoughts on the new Flash movie coming out? Obviously, the Ezra Miller thing, we'll separate on it. But
yeah, that's the hard
returning and looking like a big part of the story has me pretty pumped up.
I think, I mean, it's so hard to separate the Ezra Miller thing. Like, it is... I've always been a little more DC. I've always just, not necessarily DC guy, but I've always just been Batman through and through. And I am so excited about what they're doing with Batman in this one and the reintroduction. Like you said, there could be even a chance that George Clooney makes an appearance, or like, I'm pumped about it, but fuck, it is hard to get over the Ezra Miller thing. The fact that, like, it's like they could just ignore the Ezra Miller thing or act like they're, blissfully unaware. Like the fact that the producer came out and was like, "Oh, it's so good, you're gonna forget about everything Ezra Miller did."
Dude, shut the fuck up. That is not the way.
You're making it worse. Shut up. Yeah, don't say that shit, man. Like, you know what? If I want to go to that movie and enjoy it, let's all plead ignorance. Like, it's like when I listen to Michael Jackson or something. Like, I'm like, oops. Like, the Thriller's on. Oh no, I sang along to the whole thing. Like, I'm going to act like I didn't realize what was happening. So don't put it in my face. So I'm really pumped about The Flash. I hate how much I know I'm going to watch it. The idyllic part of me would be like, fuck Ezra Miller in a lot of ways. But I am excited, dude.
Yeah, I mean, the director, Andy Muschietti, were you a big fan of the It movies?
Yeah, the first one more than the second one.
I don't think he did the second one. I think he just did the first one.
Yeah.
But that's what, for a movie that is on its fifth director, to end up with him, I feel like DC got really fucking lucky.
Yeah. Well, I did have this. If you want to go back and listen to our movie preview for 2023, this was one of my most anticipated for multiple reasons. Was the multiverse of the Batmans, but also because of the Ezra Miller controversy. So I mean, no matter what happens, it's going to be a shitstorm in a good or bad way. So.
Again, I hate to do this. Is why Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness kind of let me down, because I let myself get excited about some insane internet rumors. Some of the names I've heard of people coming back in this are pretty fucking wild. And just versions of people, I don't know, like Nicolas Cage supposedly playing the Superman that he never got to actually make the film.
God.
Yeah, and Jack Nicholson coming back as the Joker in a brief cameo. It's just
just give me that shit.
I know, and I think Clooney's going to be in it too for a scene. I've read multiple things that say there's a pop-in.
Which is hilarious because he's so known as the worst Batman.
But if he makes some tongue-in-cheek scene, I know, I don't really look like Batman, do I?
Yeah. I hope Arnold makes an appearance too.
What's Chris O'Donnell doing? Fuck.
Oh, yeah, he's clearly, and Alicia Silverstone. They're not doing anything.
Yeah. Bruce, it's me, Barbara. I didn't realize that. Are you got anything else?
Yeah, I'll just finish up with, I think, I don't know if you're caught up fully, but I think most people are watching, is season 3 of Ted Lasso. Caught up so far. I think we have 4 episodes left in what probably and maybe this is the last season. The only thing I'll say really quickly, and I don't know if you feel the same way, season 3 definitely has a different feel to it compared to season 1 and 2. There is definitely a darker tone. It's more dramatic. It's not as lighthearted and will fill you up with season 1 and 2, man, I'm smiling when I'm watching Ted Lasso the whole time. Mm-hmm. And this season, I feel like it's every other episode that I'm smiling the whole time. The most recent episode, I don't know if you're caught up, the 2 before, when they go to Amsterdam, and the one where Sam is his restaurant and his dad visits.
Yeah.
Classic Ted Lasso. I am just giddy and smiling and just loving it. Then the newest one, I'm he just went right back. Ted's depressed and everything's sad. And
I have this weird feeling that something really bad is about to happen. I've been feeling like that for 3 or 4 episodes, and I don't like it.
I don't like it. It's not saying I still love Ted Lasso. But man, that's not what made Ted Lasso Ted Lasso. They're also really struggling with Keeley. Like,
yeah,
I think her storyline is the hardest part to watch, and not to say anything about like her. Like, it's not like I'm not rooting for her. It's just that the characters are better off together, right? And having her isolated on her own isn't interesting. Nate's redemption all of a sudden because a girl likes him. Like,
and why does she all of a sudden like him? I don't really understand.
Well, he's a fucking West Ham manager, and millionaire now. Like, of course she likes him. Like, that's not redemption. So
also,
I get, yeah.
I was gonna say I'm all for like characters growing and changing, but Jamie Tart, 2 years after season 1, is like a completely different human being.
Which I love him.
But I love him too, but it's like zero rep. It's played by the same actor, but it's not the same guy at all.
It's Pepe.
His British accent is insane.
That's not even what he sounds like in real life too. It's what's crazy. Like he decided to put on a Manchester accent, but yeah, like I mean that's what I don't mind. Like Ted Lasso has always been about the redemption arc, like about how people are more than two-dimensional. Like, and they've redeemed multiple characters. But what they're doing with Nate isn't what a girl likes him. That's it. Like, I'm sure something else is going to happen, but they really got to figure this Keeley thing out because the show is all, and I know it's easy for me as a man to be saying this right now, but the show always wrote women really well. And I feel like they're struggling on the women's side with Rebecca, like all of a sudden being depressed about Rupert again, and Keeley, like in this web of like issues with her best friend and her boss, and like all that kind of stuff. It's just like I don't know what they're doing, and I'm not having fun with it. So we'll see what happens. But I still love Ted Lasso overall.
I will say, Dark Horse character that like really came out of nowhere this season that I love. His arc, I guess maybe arc might be overstating it, but Trent Crimm.
Oh yeah, I love Trent.
What a great! Just the fact that he's like in all these key moments, but it's like in the back. He's like the National Geographic documentary, and he's like, I'm going to let the lion eat the gazelle. Like, I'm here, but I can't affect it, you know? We can't disturb nature.
I love when he, like, realizes, like, the triangle offense that Ted Lasso's finally going to run. He's like, it's going to work, and they're like, he's such a dork. He's like, yeah, but he's our dork.
Right.
But, yeah, like, just give me that shit, man, because that's the Ted Lasso, like, that was such a great episode. But, like, yeah, then we'll see what happens.
Yeah, I don't know what the end game is for these guys. I did hear that the writing team, specifically Brett Goldstein, because of the show Shrinking, did not have as much input in this season.
Yeah.
To this point, so that could.
And I think you can feel it. And he's also barely. Roy is a shell of himself. Like he's barely anything.
Yeah, and to your point, I mean, if the show doesn't continue after this, or does continue after this season, he's spoken a lot about his Marvel commitments, like.
Yeah.
I mean, he's Hercules, and he said he has several projects on the horizon. I don't know how, like, they would either have to write Roy out or he'd have to be, like...
No, the show needs, like, that's the whole thing. Like, Roy being out of it, Keeley being out of it, you can feel it struggle.
Yeah. And like everything, great line from The Dark Knight, I want it to end while it's still... what it was, what we fell in love with before it. These things tend to go on, just especially with Apple TV Plus. This is their tentpole show.
Yeah.
I can see them just trying to get out of a stone.
Die the hero.
Exactly.
You got anything else?
One thing I'll mention real quick. I saw Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 in theaters, when was it? Thursday, with the wife. Obviously, I'm, the Marvel guy on the podcast, was very much looking forward to this. Won't spoil anything in it for anyone out there. A very solid entry in the MCU. I know recently Marvel has definitely been, you could say hit or miss, but I mean, outside of like Spider-Man No Way Home, I'm trying to think of the last thing that came out with that I was like super pumped for, because I've been relatively disappointed. And this is not like an absolute home run. It's a very good movie. It's the second best Guardians movie behind the first one, which is saying something.
Okay. Yeah.
Really emotional film. And some characters really end up in interesting places at the end of this one. But I think...
some enemies become friends, some friends become enemies.
Really, really well done. Bradley Cooper's vocal performance as Rocket in this is unreal, dude. Like, Everybody thinks that he just puts on a voice and is like, yeah, man, I shoot you. Like, dude, Rocket is the emotional core of this film. And my wife was fucking bawling her eyes out at what was going on with his character in this.
How was Vin Diesel?
You know what? Of all the times he's done Groot, you can actually tell the most it's Vin Diesel in this one.
That's right. Yeah, at one point go family.
Basically. I feel like they've like ungrooted his voice the most in this one. And they dropped the first F-bomb in the MCU in this.
I heard, yes. Everyone was like, this is a big moment. Was it, okay, was it well placed or could they have done better?
It was incredibly placed because the scene that it's in, like, I won't spoil it. It is strictly done for comedic purposes, and it's like, it is so subtly put, like, but it's a scene we can all relate to.
Okay.
But it wasn't like some big epic, like, say the.
Okay, so it's not a hard, like, fuck. Was it like a fuck?
All right, skip ahead 30 seconds if you.
Yeah.
Okay, so they go to this planet and they find like an actual like car, and Peter is sitting in the car and Nebula's trying to like get inside of it, and she's like asking him all these questions about the handle, and she goes, "Just open the fucking door."
Oh, okay. Like, okay.
She's like, "Do I push the top or the bottom? Where do I go? Just open the fucking door."
Love it. Like, can't hold back.
Yeah, and I was sitting next to like a 6-year-old, and he started laughing his ass off.
That's awesome.
That's pretty good. So yeah, I mean, of course, like this is one that it's like the start of the summer movie season that this came out, so I was excited. Although I will say this, and I understand that James Gunn like writing this was like his swan song and leaving the MCU, but I'm still waiting to see the story, like the Phase 4 arc for Marvel.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we know it's leading to the multiverse, but like it has just felt all over the place with all their properties lately, and this doesn't really do anything to clear that picture up.
Yeah,
maybe, I don't know. So hopefully,
I don't think you're alone in that. From a lot of what I've been reading,
and that's not even my issue. Like my issue is that the stuff they've been putting out has sucked. Like a lot of it.
Yeah.
It's not that it's like not all connecting. I liked Wakanda Forever, but again, way too fucking long, and again, doesn't really advance anything. So
do you feel? I know this is where we're leading this conversation, but man, like they're really Hollywood lately is just plugging these long films.
It's getting a bit too much, man.
I don't know why.
And maybe my attention span is getting shorter, but I think so is the world's. So you got to make that adjustment.
Yeah.
That's one thing I think I love about shows. Obviously, like just 40 minutes in and out, wash your hands of it.
There's a reason I didn't like John Wick was a special thing. There's a reason I didn't see Avatar. Like dude, I'm not gonna fucking go for 3.5 hours for a movie that maybe is gonna be okay at best.
Right. It feels self-indulgent. It really does to make something that long. And then I mean, you can say I'm making fun of myself here, but like my attention span, I can't lock in for that long. We're not built that way anymore, you know?
Yep, I agree.
Basically, the Godfather.
Not with what society's done to us. Dude, I'm not even on. Godfather was like a thing, like that was what you did. That was there was nothing else going on. For better or for worse, our attention spans are fucked.
Yeah, back then you saw like one movie every 2 weeks, so it was like stop traffic. Nowadays, like I can fucking watch 8 billion things in 2 seconds, so it's a little bit harder to keep me locked in. All right, you got anything else?
No, I'm good. I think we covered a lot.
We did. It was good to get all that out there. All right, let's move on to the last part of our show. Our Do You Even Lift Bruh segment, our question and answer segment, where we pose a question that we leave you guys with. And you can find this link at the top of the description of this episode. It's also on our website at the very top of our homepage, bro4squad.com. But we are continuing our countdown of each of the Bros' top 100 movie lists of all time. So, Cycly, as always, if someone's listening to us for the first time, these lists that we've been counting down are not like the AFI the American Film Institute's top 100 movies of all time, or the Academy Awards top 100 films ever. Like, these are very specific to us here on the podcast.
Yeah, there are our top 100. There's nothing else to say about it other than whatever is important to you. Could be a movie when you were a child that just made you happy and you watched when things were tough. It could be a movie that made you cry, that you felt like, hey, that won the Oscar, and it was a beautiful film. It doesn't matter. It could be the stupidest movie you've ever seen, but you laugh so damn hard that you're like, you know what? That's one of my favorite films. So it is your top 100, and it's not going to look like anyone else's top 100.
I encourage you at home as well to maybe start thinking about your own list. It's a great trip down memory lane, and a lot of nostalgia obviously is involved in placing these films where they're at, and it's an unapologetic exercise. You don't have to justify it to anyone else.
I had my sisters do it. I had a couple of friends do it, and like they loved it. It's hard to do too.
It is.
Like you are having debates with yourself.
It's a exercise as well in like self-exploration. You learn a lot about yourself doing it. All right. If you click the link, you'll notice on our countdown, and I guess if you click it, you'll have this spoiled for you what Cycly's next one is. But Cycly, you're currently up to your number 53 movie of all time. Your number 54 was one of my favorites, the 1985 Clue. My number 54 was the HBO original movie with Hugh Jackman, Bad Education. And then my number 53 was 10 Cloverfield Lane. So what is your 53rd favorite movie of all time?
Yeah, so if you're a constant listener of the pod, you've probably heard me talk about James Bond, and that being my dad's number one movie franchise. I grew up watching all the James Bond films. My dad and my mom's first date back in the 60s was a James Bond film. Like that is the pinnacle of what my relationship with my dad is. Like that is a thing we do. And for me, this is Casino Royale. The first, so Daniel Craig is his first role as James Bond, and no one really knew. This was kind of an interesting one, right? Like we had finished the Pierce Brosnan James Bonds, which was a little bit of a return to form, but also then his last few movies were so ridiculous, like Die Another Day. No,
that's the one where he surfs on like the ice.
Yeah,
right.
There's
like
an invisible car. The world is not enough. Like it got to a point of like, yeah, James Bond was a spy, but like it was so extreme in the abilities and like the story arcs, and that they really decided. And I don't know if Daniel Craig had any say to this. They were like, we need to reset. We need a fresh start. Because you could argue like Sean Connery. Okay, those were based in the books. Roger Moore versus Timothy Dalton. Very different. Roger Moore was more campy and brought a little humor to it. Timothy Dalton, a little bit of try to be suave again. Pierce Brosnan, a little bit of both. I don't think Pierce Brosnan was the problem. I think he actually was a really good Bond. He just wasn't dealt the best movies. Daniel Craig comes along. And they're like, okay, if we're gonna do James Bond, continue this, we're gonna start over. And this movie, I don't know. I know you're not as much of a Bond head, but I think this is one you appreciate a little bit. It's like this movie is a pinnacle action film. It's a fantastic spy film. It is a great James Bond movie. It has some amazing suspense and like the actual like poker game. Like, I mean, it's just like this movie checks every box that you want out of any of those categories, right? Well, on its own.
They did two things that I like. Number one, they kind of took the Nolan approach with Batman Begins, where they said, let's take it back to the beginning and make it, grounded again. And while some people didn't like this second thing as much in the first part, Eva Green's Vesper.
Oh my God.
Is the first. You could correct me if I'm wrong, as you know, like the Connery series way better than I do. But the first love interest, I won't spoil obviously what happens, but the first love interest that carried over from multiple Bond films, like her presence is felt throughout probably the next three movies with.
No, all the way, all of Daniel Craig. The very last Daniel Craig film that came out a year ago, Eva Green is still fundamentally part of that. Like about what happens. So I'm like, why does James Bond sleep with three girls a movie? Right? Like. Right. That is literally James Bond is a raw agent for MI6. He's not even a 00 yet at the beginning of this film. So like the fact that he gets his first kill and then he can become a 00, and again he falls in love with Vesper, and Eva Green is fucking everything you want in a Bond girl, because she's beautiful, perfect. She's fucking class, like brilliant. Like I mean, she's
capable. She's almost in some ways she's almost. I'm like, dude, she should just fucking be James Bond.
Dude, she's on her own. Yeah, Eva Green is it. And I just think I love this movie on so many levels, because it reset the franchise, it reset the groundedness of how great James Bond can be. But if you take out, just insert random name into Daniel Craig's character and just have it be an action spy flick, this movie is just as good. Like it doesn't rely on anything but itself. And yeah, like you said, it creates who we know as James Bond, why he is the way he is. Daniel Craig brought back the masculinity of James Bond, but the suaveness that that Sean Connery had. Daniel Craig is, in my opinion, the second best James Bond, and that is not an insult to Daniel Craig. Like, that's just how good Sean Connery is. Sean Connery is James Bond. So, Casino Royale, even if you don't give a shit about James Bond, holds up. It is a great film. So one of the best action movies, in my opinion, ever.
I think what it did for me, probably audiences alike, was it just got me excited about James Bond again.
Yeah, which is hard to do back then.
Because you could tell the franchise was now in caring and capable hands. And before, it almost just seemed like, all right, let's slap James Bond on this. We're going to get a green screen. It's going to be a summer popcorn action movie. Which, not that James Bond, James Bond, like you said, has sort of tonally been all over the place depending on who is Bond.
Yeah.
But at that point, it almost just felt like, okay, we don't really have any idea what this character means. We just think it's a IP that will get people in the movie theater. But these ones felt like they actually had some sort of a direction for the character or an idea of who he was.
And James Bond was honestly teetering at a point where it was like, what are we even doing here? Like, is this even going to keep succeeding? Like, how well financially?
Like, does this play to a younger generation? Because it really hasn't been super successful, set maybe like once or twice in the last 25 years.
No, and I think you and I have talked about this. Not Casino Royale, GoldenEye. Like, we fucking love GoldenEye because of the video game. If you go back and rewatch,
dude, were you on the commentary we did like 2 years ago?
I don't know. I'm not. Maybe I will. I can't remember.
It's not that good of a movie.
It's not.
It's really not.
But the game gave us that nostalgia.
Yeah.
Like, and you go back and you're like, okay, it wasn't really. Again, I don't blame Pierce Brosnan. I think he was capable, but yeah.
Sure. But Famke Janssen in it is like the horniest movie character of all time.
Oh my god, yes. I mean, I would give it to her. It wouldn't satisfy her.
No, she would be horribly disappointed.
It would be sad,
like
actually.
Boris in it. I don't know, man. It's just got like. And I get that the villains, like, even if you go back to like Jaws and stuff and An Odd Job, they've always been like sort of ridiculous in and of themselves. But especially in GoldenEye, you're like, is this like in our universe or like? Are we? And it's probably
it does not hold up.
It does.
None of the Pierce Brosnans really do. They really don't. They're not great. And I feel bad because I feel like if Pierce was given the Casino Royale script, he would have been just fine.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. But I again, Casino Royale was the shot the James Bond franchise needed. It set the tone. Daniel Craig, some of the movies weren't as good, of course, as Casino Royale, but man, I think this one stands the test of time as one of the best Bonds and action films ever. And I think pretty sure the critic score and everyone it was universally loved.
It was loved. It was definitely loved. Yeah, it's a good one. All right, on to our number 52s to close us out tonight. I'll go first, and we'll send it back to you to end. So my number 52, I led with a quote off the top, is the 2008 Marvel Cinematic Universe's first film.
Wow.
Iron Man.
Wow.
Yeah, I know some people thought this would be a little bit higher. There are plenty of MCU movies coming up, but
this is the standard.
Yeah, Iron Man at the time was obviously a huge surprise to people. Even if you take aside the Samuel L. Jackson cameo as Nick Fury at the end, which we're going to get into in my top 100, how that was an unprecedented moment in cinema history that no one appreciated at the time. But I think what I love about this movie so much is, number one, the gamble that it took on Robert Downey Jr. And I've read the book behind, it's called The Marvel Studios Story, where Kevin Feige essentially talks about how they got this movie financed, how they started Marvel Studios with, they really only had like 4 of their main characters because they had lost the X-Men, Spider-Man, Ghost Rider, Blade, the Fantastic Four. He was like, all right, who do we have? We have this B-list character called Iron Man. We still have Captain America, who people are kind of like laughing at. Let's go with Iron Man first. And they had to way overpay to get Gwyneth Paltrow and Jeff Bridges in the movie. But it ended up being just like the biggest gamble that paid off in Hollywood history. And Tony Stark, played by Robert Downey Jr., obviously is like iconic. And when you go back and watch this, I think because it, even though it laid seeds for the bigger universe, they knew that if this movie doesn't work, then we're literally shuttering Marvel Studios the second that it starts. So all we need to focus on is making this not suck. That was Jon Favreau's goal. And it worked.
Yeah. Well, I mean, they fumble on Hulk, right? Like a little bit. I mean, obviously it wasn't the same, but like this was a big risk. And it set the tone. Like, I've never been as much of a Marvel fan, even close to what you guys are. But like, I remember seeing this in theater and being like, this is different. Like the door this opened, and now that we can look back 15 years, this was all of it. This started all of that.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's insane to think back.
And the Hulk one, which was a co-production with Universal because they still own the rights to Hulk.
Right.
Again, they had to cast Edward Norton that because they needed a marketable star, and they didn't have any of these like long-term contracts at the time. So to get him in Avengers, obviously that's like infamously one of the big contract negotiation breakdowns. But when Tony Stark shows up at the end of Incredible Hulk, you start asking yourself like, wait, is he playing the same character as he was in Iron Man?
Yeah.
And then you connect the dots to the Nick Fury cameo, and you're like, what the fuck are they going to do here?
Yeah.
But
and it was so ambitious. Let's be honest. This was an ambitious take. We had I wouldn't call him a friend, but there was an acquaintance of ours who considered himself a big movie buff, who talked about how much this is going to fail. Because I mean, I'm not trying to insult him because he ended up being wrong 15 years later in hindsight, but you also can't blame what Marvel was kicking off with that. That was a risk. I mean,
describing the Avengers in 2008 literally just sounded like a kid who like has a bunch of toys and he's like, and then dinosaur attacks Ninja Turtle, and then Ninja Turtle attacks Power Ranger. It's like, yeah, bro, cool. Like all these fucking like you're gonna link Thor, this like Shakespearean sci-fi movie with fucking Iron Man. Like that doesn't even make sense.
That's what I'm saying. Like I'm not trying to insult him. He's wrong. Like whatever. It's like freezing cold takes, but it's like. That isn't a crazy thought back in 2008 when Iron Man came out that this was going to be a shit show. Like this was too much to take on. And Marvel, I mean, proved it wrong over and over and over. The fact that you're complaining about Marvel movies in the last 2 years is crazy to me because like they were just hitting banger after banger. Then there do some bad movies.
Oh yeah. I mean,
it's crazy.
I feel like a New York Yankees fan complaining like, fuck bro, we haven't won a world championship in like 7 minutes. What is this?
Fucking sucks.
But yeah, Iron Man, I think the reason it worked, it was very character driven, and everything in that film, like his arc and what leads him to become a quote unquote superhero is very, I think, maybe not relatable in the sense of like we have been through that, but like his internal struggle of like seeing these horrible creations of his like cause all this damage just because he was profiteering off of it and having a change of heart was pretty cool. And the other cool thing about it that was sort of I can't think off the top of my head of a movie where we've seen this, but at the very end where he reveals to the world, I am Iron Man, it was just fun because you're like, all right, we're not going to do the secret identity thing anymore.
Which own that. I love it.
Because, Tony Stark, he was like, dude, if I'm a superhero, I need to fucking like get credit for it, obviously. I don't want to be parading myself around in the media. So 2008's Iron Man, obviously an important movie in my life and great on a rewatch. I watched it like a few years ago. Holds up for sure. All right, Cycling, to close us out, what's your number 52?
Yeah, it's funny. I don't even think I realized that I did this. One was talking about John Wick and the fact that with Casino Royale. I do love action movies, but I can tell you they're pretty sparse in my top 40 and top 50. So the fact that I have 2 action films tonight is pretty crazy because of how monumental these were. And this one of my 52 is The Matrix. And that's kind of like how I just prefaced that. Like, I'm not that much into action movies because, like, I don't mind action, but to tell me that's one of the greatest films ever, a film that relies on its complexity of choreography, of fight scenes and battles, like, that's fun to watch, but it's not going to, like, hit deep in my soul and be, like, something I, like, sit back and think about. But The Matrix, and kind of like what Casino Royale was again a game changer for the genre. Like, whereas Casino Royale changed the game for the James Bond saga, Matrix still, you could argue to this day, fundamentally changed how we look at action films and what it did for action films that came immediately after. It set a different tone. It set a different standard. The world that the Matrix opened up, like, right, we've gotten kind of like machines versus humans. We got the Terminators and that kind of stuff. But like, the Matrix looked at it in a completely different way, and it was low budget enough and raw enough that it just opened up this underground obsession. And while I still don't think like Matrix, when I watch it to this day, is like that amazing of a film in terms of like, holy shit, it's about what the movie meant for the generation that we lived in and what it did for the genre long term. because it's unbelievable how much of a monumental moment that was for cinema.
I mean, I'm trying to think. I feel like I'm going to be overstating this, but I would say The Matrix is one of the most influential movies of all time. Doesn't mean it's the best, but like there's a definitive era around both sci-fi, choreography, and like high concept. Let's forget about even the impact of leather in movies after The Matrix came out. But like this thing,
that's a good point.
It was not the best to do a lot of the things that it did, but it really set like a template for films. I mean, like the early aughts especially were so influenced. It's almost weird because again, it's a good movie. I would even say probably a great movie, but like, why is this the film that everyone said we have to take a little piece of this movie and copy it? But it was just fucking insane how ubiquitous ideas from The Matrix were after this.
Yeah,
Even
I mean, like the camera work.
Oh yeah, or how even like music is incorporated into a fight scene, or like use of slow motion techniques, or like think about how much like the I'm trying to think of a word for this, but even like Charlie's Angels did it, where it's like the levitation like jump kicks that people started doing after this, and that's even taking away like the concept of like they said humans versus machines and like what is reality versus like what it's free will and all the. I mean, all the ideas
mimicked in satire forever. You know, now you do any of the stop motion like spin camera movement like that solidified. But the thing is, like you and I, we always talked about like what would that been like in the 70s to go see Star Wars, right? Like that was what was The Matrix was. It was a game changer in cinema. And again, I agree. I don't think it's that great of a movie just on its own in terms of like, I mean, it is a great movie, but like, I don't think that on its own, it was just like this fundamental film. But like when you take it, the context of when it came and introduced into society and history and the impact it's had, you cannot just dilute that. You cannot ignore that.
No.
And, you know, it's not the best acted film, right? Like it's Keanu Reeves again, being awesome, but like, it's just,
and even like Lawrence Fishburne in it. Yeah. No, I agree. It's just like for whatever reason it had a big impact on filmmakers and even like pop culture.
Pop culture 100%. Like if you to ignore that, to ignore that fundamental impact. Like again, you talk about it's you and I talked about it a little bit on when we were talking about the DComs last week. It's like Disney Channel movies like, hey, maybe this is the best movie, but it had such an impact. When you think of the late 90s, early 2000s, you think Matrix.
Yeah. It would be a fun game to play, like to watch any action movie that came out like in the subsequent years after The Matrix.
Yeah.
And I bet you can pick out at least one thing that feels like it was even slightly inspired by it.
Yeah.
And I don't want anyone to think at all that that's an indictment on those filmmakers, because that's what art is. It's like a lot of it is partially derivative of stuff that inspires you. And that's what the great thing about The Matrix
is. Everything we watch.
Yeah. It gave all these great ideas. Now, granted, it's been parodied. I know in the MTV Movie Awards, Will Ferrell had like a really funny skit about this, but like the lore or the mythology of the actual Matrix, like really in Matrix Revolutions fucking collapses in on itself, but you can't judge the original based on like what they ended up doing.
No. And it's still like it's still a modern part of it's still part of the conversation in the world. Like, are we in a simulation? Are we just like, you know, like plugged into the red pill, blue pill? Like, it is still fundamentally part of our society today. It's still referenced all the time. Like, it is what Star Wars was 20 years later. It is crazy what The Matrix is to me. But yeah, like, I had to represent it again. I don't have many action films left, and I had 2 in a row, and they're there for a reason.
In my head, I'll never forget, like, as soon as an action scene starts, that guitar riff, that it's like so early aughts Matrix-esque. And like every movie that came after that again took a little piece of, some took bigger pieces than others and weren't so coy about it. Others were very like on the nose, like, yeah, this is fucking from The Matrix. Bullet Time, I believe, is what they call it.
Oh yeah, Bullet Time. If you reference it right now, and that's what that tells you a lot. Like for us in the 90s, 20 years after Star Wars, we still knew what those references were. If you do a Matrix reference for a Gen Z or the generation behind Gen Z, they're not going to be like, what the hell is that? They're going to be like, oh, that's the fucking Matrix.
Exactly.
Like, that's how much of a staple that movie is.
Yeah, it was awesome. Good one. I'm glad that was on. I mean, I don't know. I can't remember if that's on my list coming up or not. I don't think it is. Oh, but wow. I definitely appreciate the contribution it made. All right. Cycling, before we let the people go for episode 205, any closing words of wisdom you have?
Yeah, I haven't said this in a while, guys, but the left lane on the highway is for passing. So if you're going the speed limit, be in the right lane. If you're going slower than the speed limit, even if you're going 5 miles faster than the speed limit, be in the right lane unless you're passing someone. So just get out of the way.
And I will, I'll piggyback off of that. Speaking of left lane etiquette, twice in the past week or so, I saw someone, and again, I understand it's not as likely in the day of GPS that this is happening, but if you don't know where you're going, that's slightly acceptable. But I've seen people in the left lane have to jut over 3 lanes in like a quarter mile because it's their exit. Look, dude, if your exit is next, you can't be in the far left lane. Like,
even if you don't know where you're going, but you're like, oh, I'm pretty sure in the next 5 miles. Get in the right lane.
I get over probably way too early, if I'm being honest. Because I ain't about that left lane life. You know what I'm saying?
No. You never have been, and you acknowledge it. That's what's impressive. I always love you for that.
Yeah, it's bitch, but at least you got to know who you are.
Yeah,
good advice. I'll just say my bit that I always say, especially as we're getting closer to summer and we're about to get those summer haircuts. Look, when you go into the barber shop, that's not the time to be taking big risks. Okay, let's stay away from any exotic hair colorings. You're not a K-pop band member, and if you are a K-pop band member, you're not a K-pop band member listening to this. And just don't, when you look at that poster with all the different options that they can give you the haircuts, let's stick to the basics, especially if you're over the age of like 25. If you want to experiment when you're like in middle school, then YOLO. But when you're an adult, let's everybody fucking relax. Make smart choices in the haircut chair.
I always feel like this very personal attack on me that you're like, you do it when I'm on. It's weird.
I don't know. You've had several different haircuts throughout my life with you. You had the long hair when that was popular,
but I had the mop head.
Yeah, the shaggy hair, which I never was able to rock, but the one that you've had for like the past probably half decade has been working very well.
Well, I put the Nike sign back in the back now. It's like that.
Cool. What would have been funny if we were kids if some kid did like the Reebok symbol?
Yeah,
it's like,
fuck on.
What? Or like Champ Sports. It's like
the champion look.
Yeah, I want apparel, but I don't want to get like the biggest apparel brand. It's too obvious.
I literally did ask for it when I was a kid, the Nike, and my mom did not let me.
See, that's a weird one because like it's gonna grow back so fast. It's where the.
Why would I even like? Why is that a thing?
Did you want it in like the back or on the side?
Yeah, in the back.
That's see, why would we want that where we can't even see it?
Yeah,
we're so stupid. I begged my mom for the mushroom hair, where it's like.
Oh God.
She wouldn't let me get it, and I was livid.
Yeah, but our mothers knew best. Now that we're at an age that we can admit that.
It's true. Mom knows best. All right. For our legal counsel, Ronnie Cycli, I'm the mayor, Jeff Hornacek. We are the Bro Force Squad podcast. Thank you guys so much for checking us out. Follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Bro Force Squad. You can type in Bro Force Squad as 3 separate words pretty much anywhere. YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music. You'll find us there. And check out everything we've ever done on our website, broforcesquad.com. Till next time, we'll see you at the movies. And if it's John Wick 3, then bring a meal, because I'm eating.